do it.
Okay, we started.
Awesome.
Woohoo.
Excited for this.
Yeah, totally. So we have people from all over the world here, which is exciting. I always like these kind of events.
It's actually cool to think about. Just like everyone's tuning in.
Yeah. I have a friend who organized a 24-hour event for her company. So 24 hours where there was like constant content and like speakers. And I'm like, oh my God, she was up for 24 hours organizing everything.
Really?
I don't know how she did it, but it
That's
was really cool. Yeah. It's like everybody from all over the world, they're kind of getting together and like.
Was it like a continuous Zoom? Like people were in and out of the Zoom? Like,
Yes.
but she had to be the one
Basically.
consistent person on the entire time?
Basically, yeah.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool event though.
No, it really is. But that's actually a cool idea. Tyler, let's do it. Let's put Brad on there for 24 hours straight and we'll go from there.
I'll just ship him a case of Red Bull.
Brad would love it.
He would love it.
Yeah.
So I see there are some people that are already connected. So hi, everyone. We're going to wait a few more minutes for everyone to join. But yeah, we're going to. So hi, everyone, and welcome.
Perfect.
I started drinking iced tea. That's like cold brewed iced tea. So it's just cold water with tea inside. And I love it. I drink it like all day long and I keep on filling it up with more and more water. And so now it's like, you see the colors like really bright, right? Soon it's going to get like very dull. It's going to be like
it's
water
just diluted
with a little tea
at this
bag.
point.
Yeah.
It's just water plus the, yeah.
Totally.
That's so funny. No, I don't know. I actually don't know. You don't know this, Rachel, but I don't drink coffee ever.
Oh my God.
So I know
Wow.
it's a whole thing.
You never drank coffee or like
I drank it like once or twice and it just wasn't a good fit. I don't know. Just wasn't into it.
Okay, cool. So what do you drink like when you wake up in the morning? Are you a tea person?
Water, just normal water. Go on a day.
I feel like that's the healthy thing to drink, no?
Probably. Yeah, probably. I don't know. Don't know why it went that way, but it didn't end up trending. Yes, the webinar is talking about juice. Awesome. Cool. I think it's so funny.
Love it. D Joybox, right? Wrote that. Hi D.
Awesome. So I think we'll give it a few more minutes, or Rachel, I'll let you run it.
Yeah, sure. I think usually I'll wait like one more. I think I'll wait like one more minute, and then we'll get started. I see we have more and more participants joining.
Oh, that's perfect. How to create beverages that hydrate you while you sleep. Love it, Bo.
Ooh. By the way, I love the name of this webinar. Who thought of this name? It's a good one.
It's a good one. That's the plan. We all just want to make money while we sleep, right? So
yeah, it's best.
It's way easier. It's way easier that way.
For sure. Okay, I think it's time.
Let's do it.
Cool, so let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. If you're not familiar with us, Taboola is the world's largest discovery platform. Over 20,000 companies use us to reach over 1.4 billion people every month. Today, we're here to talk about how to create content that makes money while you sleep. That's, of course, what we all want. We're really excited to have you all. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. So as we're talking, on the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a chat feature, which I know a few of you have already started using. So feel free to ask us any questions throughout the webinar. And when we're finished at the end, we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can. So joining us today is Partnerstack's VP of Marketing, Tyler Calder. I hope I said that right, guys. And Partnerstack's Director of Channel Partnerships and Alliances, Nikita Zhitkevich. And myself, Rachel Zalta. Let me turn it over to Tyler to get started.
Thank you, Rachel. So yeah, we can do a little bit of an introduction around a little bit deeper. So like Rachel said, my name is Tyler. I head up marketing over here at Partnerstack. My background has been 13, 14 years in revenue-based marketing. So very, very focused on driving revenue, both B2C and B2B. 7 of those years agency side and 6 client side. So really, really excited to dive in today and chat about some of those experiences. And I'll just let Nikita do a bit of a deeper introduction as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tyler. Yeah, so I've been at Partnerstack for what feels like an eternity in startup years, but it's only been 4 years. Basically, I've spent a lot of time in channel sales and partner and affiliate marketing, work with a lot of different organizations and have helped them stand up their programs. Additionally, I've worked with a lot of different partners and seen a lot of different methods of promotion of content or just a lot of things that I'll kind of dive into a little bit deeper. Semi-avid skier, and I like to call myself a tennis pro, but I'm definitely not. And kind of a co-founder of a content affiliate myself called stackamplify.com. But we'll kind of dive into it a little bit more.
Awesome. So you've been 4 years. I've been at Taboola for 5.5 years. So I get that. They call me like a dinosaur in startup years.
Basically, right?
Yeah. And Taboola really was like a small startup when I joined, and now, we've become a big company. So it's kind of cool to have been part of that. So my name is Rachel Zalta. I head up the creative shop at Taboola. Basically what the creative shop does is we take creatives from advertisers that come to use our platform, and we'll optimize those creatives. So we'll take a title or an image or video or a piece of content, and we'll change it in order to fit best, to fit our platform best. My background's in psychology, and I like to always look at like data and behaviors that we see online from that perspective. I think it's really interesting to look at it from like the human or psychology perspective.
Cool. So I'm going to kick it off here, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So Rachel's going to go pretty deep into the tactics around, creating incredible content that's going to work for you while you sleep. I want to zoom out a little bit and talk about this idea of blockbuster content. And so when we think about content generation and content development, certainly what we see and what I've seen agency side is there are a vast number of companies and individuals that are just creating content that's good enough, right? It's similar to what everybody else is writing. Maybe they do a little bit of keyword research. They leverage that keyword research to drive their editorial calendar, and they're writing articles that are 500 to 1,000 words in length, and that's about it, right? They're writing good enough content. And the reality is, if you go back 10 years ago, good enough content was enough to drive a business. It was enough to rank on Google. But now it's become so competitive. It's been so saturated by companies just developing this so-called good enough content that really, give me 1 second. My Siri is all over the place right now.
Oh my God,
Siri knows you're talking about good content.
Siri's asking me about content. So really what we suggest is trying to level up and view this blue ocean that exists, which is the creation of blockbuster content. And I'll talk about what that actually means in a second. But really, when we think about blockbuster content, it's moving in a direction where there's less competition, there's less saturation, and it's really about thinking about your own expertise and how do you start to monetize that by deep content. And I do want to call out an individual, Michael Shannon. You can Google his name. He does some great thinking on content development. This idea of blockbuster content is very much one of his thoughts that I've borrowed. So I just wanted to give credit where it's due. But if we think about, just jump into the next slide on this idea of what is that equation for blockbuster content? What does it actually mean? This is how we typically think about it. So the first one is depth, right? And so when we think about depth, depth certainly means length of content. What the data shows is, on average, pages that rank top 3 on Google, you're looking at 2,000 to 3,000 words in length on average, which is part of depth. The other part of depth is just thinking about how do you explore various viewpoints on a given topic? How do you go, deeper than just surface level? So I challenge people to think about, what is the most extreme version of this idea or this piece of content? And then you can start to work backwards from there, but just think about how are you going to go deep into a certain topic? And that might be research, which lends itself to credibility, right? So the other big thing with blockbuster content is how are you going to position yourself as credible? So that could be leveraging data, it could be leveraging research, it could be leveraging authority figures. So again, you want to think about depth, and within depth, how do you lend yourself to credibility? It's not just about writing for the sake of writing. And then as you are going into that depth, also think about your audience, right? And what are those emotional elements that are triggering for your audience? So, for us, we do a lot of B2B writing, and the emotional element around B2B writing is, your career growth, how do you level up your skill set? How do you become that position you want to be, right? So not necessarily just focusing on kind of the factual, which is a lot of what B2B writing is. How do you extend beyond and go into the emotional? And then part of the emotional is how do you write about something that's maybe unexpected? Perhaps it's a controversial viewpoint, maybe it's a unique perspective. And so again, I challenge our team to think about what are we saying that other people aren't? What's the value that we're going to bring to the conversation? And then the last big one is how do you amplify it? So you can't necessarily just create it, right? Build it and hope that will come. You want to think about how are you going to get this in front of the right type of people? We leverage platforms like Taboola to extend our reach, promotion through social, our email database, that type of thing. So you want to think about what your distribution of content is as well. And then what we're looking for and this sort of virtuous cycle that we're trying to build is really let's be deliberate about the time that we invest into content up front. That time that we spend will help us build that depth, build the quality of content. We've seen the depth and quality will lead to a very measured improvement in overall performance. And then with that improved performance, you can start to justify more budget and invest more into your content. And again, create better content. It becomes a cycle. So again, this is really what I suggest people focus on is invest in that first piece up front, and then use that to drive performance and use that performance to justify further investment. And one of the examples I love, because I'm a bit of a comic book nerd, is just Marvel. So if you look at Marvel, their phase 1 of their movie releases, they released 6 movies in 4 years, right? And it started with Iron Man. Iron Man was a big movie, right? Certainly a blockbuster movie. But it was a test, right? They didn't actually know if this would pay off. And so it was a small test. In the context of blockbuster movies, it was a small test. And the performance of it justified another movie, which was another test, and then another movie, which was another test. And that's the way they thought about it, right? They didn't have this idea that, hey, we're going to launch movie after movie after movie through the course of a year. It was, let's invest up front. Let's start with one, see how it performs, and then use that to justify investing into the next. And so if we look at where they're at now, just on the next slide, there's in a single year cycle, they're launching 8 movies, right? And so from a content standpoint, this is what I suggest is focus on the first one. If the first one works well, reinvest and then do another one. And then you want to get to a point where you can very predictably launch this larger form blockbuster type of content. But you don't have to start there, right? I don't think we should be intimidated by this word blockbuster and the work that goes into it. Just start with one. And then a couple quick examples of what this looks like. The first one, this is a company, Precision Nutrition. I worked with them for a little while. They were a client of mine, and then I worked in-house with them. Highly recommend you check out their website from a content standpoint. They do an incredible job of writing big, meaty, blockbuster pieces of content, just precisionnutrition.com. And the way that we would think about content, we would say, okay, we want to write about just a broad topic of what should I eat based on my body type, let's say, right? That was the idea. And so the first step is we would go to Google. We would say, who's ranking on Google right now for that? What could we do that might be 10 times better, right? And so that's where we go into brainstorming mode, think about what's the most extreme version that would be better. And then we set forth to write it. And for us, that meant long form, including a lot of research, academically sourced, as you can see here, like our own custom illustrations and infographics. And then the way that we monetized that traffic was driving to very clear conversion points and clear call to actions. So in this case, we were selling certifications around nutrition and that type of thing. So this is one way to monetize that content, right, is driving to your own products, services. And then if we look at the next example is a little bit more B2B. So if you think about, as a very tactical example, somebody searching for, what's the best landing page builder that exists? Again, one of the things you can do is who's already writing about it? And then what can I do that's significantly better than that? And so this is a really good example that we can link to and you can check out. This is an 8,000 word breakdown of all of the different landing page builders that exist. And the typical, right? So when you think of good enough content would be 3 bullets for pros, 3 bullets for cons for each. What this content does is go into full video demos. It goes into total cost of ownership of adopting a piece of software. It goes really in depth for every single one. And then the way that they monetize is through affiliate links, right? So then they'll drive traffic to somebody like Unbounce and then take a cut if that person actually purchases. So I'll stop there, and I know Rachel's going to go into a little bit more detail about how you execute on some of this, but I'll be watching the chat if anybody has questions about what I just covered.
Great, cool. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more about how do we think about creating content for people in different stages of the funnel. So of course, today we're going to be talking about content that performs, right? We're not just talking about content for awareness. We called this webinar content that makes money while you sleep. So it has to be related to performance. But you can actually do that without thinking about what stage of the funnel you're looking to tackle. Some people would think that content that performs means we're only focusing on the bottom of the funnel. So on like the decision. But we actually need to think about the whole funnel if we want to eventually impact the bottom line. So for the purposes of this webinar, and we do this internally too sometimes, we kind of like name different people in different stages of the funnel. And sometimes by giving them like a name and a face, it helps us relate to them. So for the purposes of this webinar, we're going to use Alex, who is the gentleman on the left, Anna and Joseph as examples. So let's start with Alex. Alex is in the awareness stage. He might not even know that your product is a good fit for his lifestyle. Okay, so you could like kind of try to imagine like a person behind the awareness stage. Anna, she's in the consideration stage. So she knows she needs a product like yours, but she's not sure that yours is actually the best fit for her. And then there's Joseph. Joseph is in the decision stage. So he knows he wants to buy. He also knows he wants to buy your product, but he just hasn't gotten around to do it for one reason or another. So each of them can be nurtured and eventually converted to sale with content, but we need to adjust that content just a little bit based on, of course, the different stages that they're in. So what we're going to do now is take a look at a few examples in 3 key verticals. So B2B, finance, and education. Okay, so the first example is a credit card example. So let's think about Alex, who again is in the awareness stage. Alex really isn't in the market for a credit card right now. And he's never even heard of your brand. So what do you do to kind of connect with him? What you can do is you can get him familiar by targeting him with media coverage of your recent CSR initiative or a video about how your products contributed to family life, right? Something that's very high level. As opposed to that, if we're thinking about Anna, who's in the consideration phase, she is in market for a credit card, but she isn't sure that yours is actually the best for her. So here, an article about like the 5 attributes of a great credit card deal can be really good, or a long form product landing page can work too. And if we're thinking about Joseph, who is in the decision phase, he is interested in your offer. He just needs a little bit of a push. So here you can entice him with content about the features of your specific credit card or a short form landing page to remind him to buy. And then of course, loyalty is really important to us. So here we want to keep customers coming back with articles like how to use credit card points wisely, or, you know, credit scores and how much of your credit score you should be really using, of your credit you should be really using. Okay, second example, email marketing platform. Okay, so in this case, let's go back to Alex, who's in the awareness stage. So Alex thinks he's fine using his traditional email client. He's not sure that he needs a separate piece of his tech to manage his lists and communications. So how do we approach him? So he needs convincing that more advanced email marketing could be the solution for his business needs, right? He needs like really, he needs like very, again, very general information about your product and why it could be relevant for him, why it can make his life better. As opposed to that, Anna, she knows she needs a better solution. But again, she's not sure that your product is the right product for her. So there you can try to convince her that your product is the right solution with a little bit of guidance of, you know, why it's the right solution. So things like how to choose the right email marketing platform for your tech stack can be, that could be a good article to kind of show her. And then Joseph, he knows he's interested in you, but he might need some more social proof or a final reminder of your platform's best features. So a landing page of like how to improve lead gen for these marketers can be helpful for Joseph. And then again, if we think about loyalty, we always want to nurture current customers with content that works well for them. So in this case, it would be like Black Friday email marketing examples that sell. And then we have one more example. So this is an online course, which I think is very relevant these days. So let's try to think about, again, an online course from the perspective of content and people in different stages of the funnel. So if we think about Alex, you know, he needs to be convinced that an online learning course will add some kind of value to his life, right? He doesn't even think that's interesting to him. So here you want to show him how online learning can advance his career and his personal life. If we think about Anna, again, she wants to sign up for something, but she's not sure what. So you want to show her a list of top sites or provide her with an article that kind of showcases your specific strengths. And Joseph, he needs to just be reminded. So try to remind him that signing up for this course is the right move for him by targeting him with short form landing pages or articles with reminder headlines and a hard sell. So something like, you know, smarter you is just one click away can work for him. And then if we think about loyalty, we want to keep customers around by showcasing new courses when they're available and bragging about successful students or anything else that can be interesting for your clients. Okay, so now that we know which stage of the funnel where, you know, the people that we're trying to reach are in, we're going to talk a little bit about the design best practices. So at Taboola, we have, you know, millions of pages that are trying to convert. And what we did is we analyzed those pages to come up with best practices. So that's what I'm going to go through today. I mean, in this section. Okay, so the first thing that before I even go into these specific notes, the first thing I like to talk about is how to be native to the experience. So somebody coming from Taboola is going to be coming from usually a premium publisher site. They're going to be reading news on a site. And when they click on sponsored content, they expect to see real content. And if it reminds them of a news site, then the experience becomes much more natural. So if you can give the feeling of a news site or of, you know, real authentic content, that is probably what's going to work. So that's more on like the feeling perspective. But now I want to go into it a little bit more specifically. So we want to keep it clean and keep it simple. Topping it off with an image usually works. That's usually how a news article is also designed. And making it readable. So adding bolded subheaders is really helpful. Okay, CTAs is something that we get a lot of questions about. So we usually recommend adding a CTA to the bottom of the article and adding another CTA that's a little less aggressive, a third of the way down your page. And then that would be in the form of a link. We recommend not relying on a CTA in the right rail because usually people tend to ignore that. That's an area where banner ads appear. And so there's a lot of banner blindness there. And not to place your CTA below share buttons and or comments. You know, these best practices seem very straightforward, but you'd be surprised how many people kind of don't pay attention to these details and how changing one of these details can make a big difference. Adding a sentence above your CTA can be really helpful too. So saying, you know, telling the user why they should take action in a simple way is helpful. If you can give them some kind of incentive as well, we found that that works really well. Using precise action-oriented language inside the button, like buy or sign up now. So you don't really want to have a lot of text in there. And we recommend not having too many buttons. So, you know, focusing on one call to action is our best practice. If you can gamify the process in any way, we found that that works really well. But one thing that you want to make sure is not to make your call to action, your final and most important call to action at the bottom of the article. You don't want it to look like a banner. So what happens is a lot of times, just for design purposes, people will put like a color block, like you see here, this gray color block behind the call to action. And what happens is that in our brains, it's processed as just another banner ad. So people tend to just ignore that. So if you just leave the background white and you have that call to action there, that actually works better. And don't rely on a floating call to action in the footer. And then just a few more tips and tricks. So we recommend innovating and testing different videos, photo galleries, quizzes, and other unique content types on your pages. And definitely always continue testing. You should always be testing a few different things on your pages. Again, you'd be surprised how these small changes can make a really big difference in your conversion rates. Okay, so we spoke about the stages of the funnel, and then we spoke about the design. And what I want to talk about now is the copy itself. So we're going to start with the blog article title. Your title is going to capture reader attention, and it's going to make some kind of promise about what visitors are going to read afterwards, right? So you want to make sure that your article title is doing these two things. It's making some kind of promise and it's grabbing attention. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you're advertising or if you're amplifying your content through Taboola, then you'll have this kind of what we call a SC card. So this SC card includes a title and an image. And then that title needs to have the same message as the title that is going to be on your page. Because if they're gonna have a different title or a different message, someone's gonna click on the ad expecting one thing and then get to your page and see something totally different. And usually what we see there is a very high bounce rate. So people aren't actually gonna stay on your page or convert. So you need to make sure to kind of set user expectation with the first title. And after they click, get to a title that kind of fits that message. So if we try to go through a few bad titles, you know, if the content is about foods that incredibly healthy people eat, right? So that's what your product is. Don't write a title like fitness tricks to complement healthy meals, because then people are going to expect one thing and get something totally different. Instead, write something like, you know, 5 superfoods to take your health to the next level. That's a great way to kind of be enticing, grabbing attention, and making a promise about what you're going to talk in the rest of your article. So the second thing that, that we need to think about when we think about the content itself is the hook. In the hook, we're going to answer the promise that you made in the title immediately and in an enticing way. So here, if the title is incredibly healthy people eat these foods in daily meals, you don't want to write something like the best foods to eat to boost your health are nutritionally dense and include a high volume of vitamins, fiber, and proteins. I fell asleep by reading that sentence, right? You want to be enticing, but you don't want to be too enticing. So you still want to give value. You still want to answer that promise that you gave in the title. So saying something like Jenny lost 10 pounds and increased her max bench by 15 pounds in just 1 month when she started this new program, right? You want to give them a little bit of value in the hook. So a good hook would be, you probably already have these superfoods in your pantry, right? So you're being enticing there. You simply need the tools to incorporate them into your diet more regularly, which kind of hints to the promise, right? That's what we're going to give you. We're going to give you the tools to incorporate them into your diet.
Rachel, I think these are great examples of hooks. Like the difference between them is substantial.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And this is like taken from the journalism world, which I think is so interesting to look at these best practices from that perspective. Okay, so we have a nut graph. That's the next thing that we're going to focus on. Here, your reader should receive the entire message of your article in these 1 to 3 sentences. So think of this as like a brief summary. So if your hook is, you probably already have these superfoods in your pantry. You simply need the tools to incorporate them into your diet more regularly. Don't write something like, your current meal plans aren't working hard enough on your behalf. You need new ingredients to truly reach your goals. We'll show you the foods that work hard for your body. Sorry, there's a lot of me reading, but that example was not good because it was very fluffy. It was like, it was enticing people again. But in the nut graph, we're not trying to entice anymore. Now we entice them enough to actually start reading the article. And here, we want to give them some value. We want to give them a summary of the rest of the article. So saying, giving examples here, like I'll read a few words from this good nut graph. With just a few added ingredients or tweaks in your current meal plan, you can improve your overall health and strength, including ingredients like avocados, sweet potatoes, blueberries, kale, right? We're already giving people value in the nut graph. We're giving them examples and information that is going to be valuable for them. Think of it as, somebody that's coming to read an article, they might only read the nut graph. So what do you want to tell them in the nut graph that if they leave the article now, they'll still get something out of it. They'll still get that message that you wanted them to hear. Call to action. So we spoke a little bit about call to actions before. After your nut graph, this is where we usually include the subtle call to action. And it's very specific regarding the action that you want the reader to take. So we usually recommend this to be like a hyperlink or a form. So right after the nut graph, we're going to place that call to action. And instead of having like an aggressive call to action, like sign up right now, we'll have a call to action that is more explanatory or relates to what we just spoke about. So let us incorporate these superfoods for you, sign up for our program. So as you can tell, it's a little bit less aggressive and it kind of fits the tone of the previous paragraph. Section headers are really important. We spoke about that in the design a little bit, but it's also really important from a copy standpoint. So one thing to, again, similar to the nut graph, a lot of people won't actually read the whole article. Instead, they'll only read the headers. So the header should actually summarize your whole entire article. You still want to give someone value, even if they just skim the headers. So if we think about bad section headers, it would be like vegetables that energize, healthy fats to fill you up, because that's not giving you any value. Instead, give people more information. So something like vegetables that energize, kale, sweet potatoes, and more. By just going through these section headers and leaving the page or getting to the CTA and wanting to click, you're giving people value and they're getting information just from reading the section headers. And then we have the final CTA. This final CTA is going to be a little bit more aggressive, as readers who make it to the end, they are actually interested usually in committing to the topic. We definitely recommend A/B testing a number of CTAs and placements. So if we think about a bad final CTA, it's more like make incorporating these foods easy. That would be like usually what we put in the middle of the article after the nut graph. A good final CTA would be a little bit more aggressive. So it would be something like sign up for our 6-week program. And then tone. Tone's really interesting. So here you're writing for someone who's either heard of you but might not have heard your story, or someone who's never heard of you at all. So you want to give somebody that is reading this article a good first impression. So the important things to keep in mind here are to be explanatory, straightforward, and conversational. We have a few examples here of things that can be interesting. And I think, Tyler, you mentioned one of these before. So find ways to infuse your credibility. So saying something like, with our program, people are eating 10% more superfoods throughout the week, right? So that helps increase that credibility and it kind of fine tunes that tone a little bit. Assure your reader that you know him or her. So saying something like, if you're just building your first meal plans, you'll want to focus on a few foods that you most likely, that you like most to see the biggest improvement. Avocados. I think most people like avocados, right? I feel like it connects to more people. Kale too, and salmon are reported among the easiest superfoods to incorporate into a variety of daily diet plans, right? It makes people like connect to this right away. And then the last example here is to use plain language. So talk to people as if they know nothing about your topic. So don't assume that they understand all the different, words that you'll talk about. So instead of low-fat proteins, omega-3 fatty acids, and vitamin C should be a part of, explain a little bit more. So say something like, your body needs a balance of vitamins, minerals, and proteins to optimize energy level. This includes things like, it's blah, blah, blah. And then we have a couple of examples here. One from the finance industry. So we have Lending Tree. On the left is the creative, the title and the image that were used on Taboola that led to this article. And if you look at the article, even just a brief skim, you can tell that they are using all of our best practices and they're doing really well in our network. So it ended up panning out. So you can see that they're using the subheaders and the calls to actions. And then we have Blinkist here is another great example. Another great example of a really great content that worked really well and that incorporated our best practices.
That's awesome, Rachel. There's so many good tips in there. I actually want to address, like, there's a ton of people asking, but everyone's going to get a recording of this afterwards, right?
Yes, everyone's going to get a recording of it and the deck itself.
Yeah, because I think, you know, I probably empathize with a lot of people in the chat. Like, there's just so much content there, and all of it's so, like, actionable that it's just so hard to just take notes on all of it right away.
Yeah, I totally get that. Don't worry, guys. We got you.
Awesome. Well, it's going to be hard to follow Tyler and Rachel, but mine is just going to be talking about the untapped opportunity of partnerships and where content kind of fits in. So for those that aren't familiar with channel partnerships or affiliate, you know, there's different types of partnerships, and there's about 4 main kind of tranches. There's affiliate partnerships, which is what I would call the one-to-many partnerships. You write content, or you have an audience, and you talk to specific products to that audience, and they kind of sign up. Referral or more one-to-one partnerships, so you know that individual yourself personally, and you want to make an introduction to either a specific product or a specific company, and those are kind of referrals that you make. There's technology partnerships. This is largely integration partnerships between organizations. So a lot of people, and you know, the big news of the day in the tech world is Salesforce acquiring Slack. That is a really good example of not just an acquisition, but an actual integration between Salesforce and Slack itself. And then there's reseller partners. So these big organizations that actually go out and resell software. But of these 4 kind of different partner types, I really want to focus in and narrow in on technology and affiliate programs, because content, especially for these 2 types of partnership models, goes really deep and acts as the primary method of promotion for how they do a lot of things. And so basically, you can go to the next slide there, Rachel. But basically, there's a few different ways that it's done. And in technology partnerships and integrations, the content is used to really announce an integration partnership. So for example, you know, hey, Slack is integrating with Salesforce. This is super exciting. This is the benefit that this will drive to you. And there's so much ecosystem value in those integrations that it's incredibly important to communicate that value through content, and, you know, whether it's, you know, written content or webinars, you know, whatever that is at the end of the day. But as more organizations turn to technology partnerships and these types of kind of integrations, that content and how that content is presented is incredibly important. A lot of what we see today in the technology partnership space is it isn't necessarily being shown in the best way, or it's not even necessarily showing some of the best practices that Rachel went into. And so that does a lot of things, but what it mainly does is it causes people to not take an interest in some of those integrations. So it would effectively say, like, people just frankly won't even know that they exist. There's been tons of examples even at Partnerstack where you know, we would take so much benefit out of a Slack integration or an integration between Slack and Salesforce that we just didn't know existed until somebody actually had to dive deep into kind of the product roadmap and realize that it was there. So that's kind of one example. But the other example is just the affiliate partnerships and what the affiliate partner world looks like. And so basically, in affiliate, there are, and so just to go back a second there, affiliate partners are like these one-to-many partners. They effectively have this audience, and they want to talk about different kind of solutions and products to that audience. Now, well, for a lot of affiliate in B2B and B2C, it's done through content. And traditionally, that content is typically done and has been on the B2C side. Now, basically, on the B2C side, it's been figured out for a really long time. So if you go to a typical website that, you know, that is promoting different products or different physical goods, you'll see them, you see a little description like Tyler talked about before, like, hey, I'm an affiliate for these products, and they review a lot of different products. But on the B2B side, it's still very much a blue open ocean of opportunity, because not a lot of individuals actually, you know, realize that this is a market that exists. And so there aren't that many affiliates or even content affiliates in the B2B space that own the space. You have your typical kind of content syndicators, content aggregators that create specific, pieces of collateral for organizations to promote them, but not a lot of it exists today. And what that presents is a significant opportunity for the people that want to take it to create content that talks about the value of whether it's B2B software, whether it's the integrations that that software provides, to an audience of business readers that ultimately need that information to either level up in their career, like Tyler talked about, or even to provide business efficiencies. But it just doesn't exist. And so there's a huge opportunity to apply a lot of what Tyler talked about, a lot of what Rachel talked about, and create, even just content that is more specific to the B2B audience that'll really engage them, because not a lot of it currently exists today. And there's so much opportunity in that world that we're only even, I think, just starting to just see the surface level of partners really coming in and affiliates starting to build out collateral for it. I guess, Tyler, you brought up a really good example of Adam on it. How have you seen this industry kind of evolve? I know you've been on both sides there.
Yeah, I mean, the evolution that I've seen is really high level what I opened with, which is this shift from very short form, superficial, surface level content. If we go back 5 or 6 years, maybe longer, call it 7 or 8 years, there's like 9 million blogs that existed in North America. Now it's well over 50, 60 that get measured traffic. And so the biggest shift has been people realizing that, yeah, if I just scratch the surface with like I talked about, good enough content, I'm not going to build an audience, right? And if I'm not going to build an audience, then I can't monetize that audience. And if I can't monetize that audience, then why are we doing this? And so that's the biggest shift is people that are standing out really being focused on creating this kind of longer form, in-depth content. For me, that's the biggest shift that I've seen is just the quality has been leveling up, and there's still room for lots of other people to do it. It hasn't been saturated, but that's the biggest shift.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that's honestly what we're starting to see on the B2B affiliate side, where a lot of individuals won't necessarily, like, you can't create simple content about B2B solutions. It needs to be engaging, it needs to be in depth, and it has to have a lot of substance to it. So there's a lot of opportunity for individuals that are creating content to do it incredibly well and develop a reputation as being the kind of the leader in that space there. And I know, someone just kind of asked the question of, how do you find B2B affiliates in your space? Well, there's a few different ways, and I'll just kind of talk about it for a second, but just even kind of Google individuals or affiliates that might be associated to your brand, or a lot of different kind of, you can even leverage different agencies as well to help recruit partners for you. But happy to answer that in more depth with specific examples if you want to just like shoot me a message on LinkedIn as well.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, we're all happy to answer questions on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with us there. I'm trying to go through these questions really quickly. I have a few here. So I'll ask you guys, but if you guys pick up on anything that you want to answer, then feel free to. Nikita, I see one for you here, but I guess I think you touched on that too, right? Like, can you provide an example of B2B? You just answered that, right?
Yeah, I think okay. I just hit on it, but yeah, basically, awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool. And then it looks like there's one for you, Tyler, here. So how do you think about content promotion and selling budget for promotion?
Yeah. So one of the things I mentioned was the importance of distribution and making sure that you have a plan to get your content out there. And part of that is having dollars set aside so you can promote your content. The way to go back to the Hollywood example, the way that Hollywood thinks about it, and when you're promoting a movie, is basically 50% of your production budget should be your promotional budget. So that's roughly the way that I think about it. If it costs me $500 to produce a piece of content, then I'll set aside $250 to promote it, right? And that could be promoted through social, through a network like Taboola. If it costs me $50,000 to produce a piece of content, then I'm going to set aside 25,000 to try to promote it. Right. So I think of it that way because it's easy. It's an easy way to think about it, and it scales based on the type of content and kind of the value of that content that you're producing. And then from there, it's just data driven. So if it's performing really, really well for you and it's driving business for you, it's driving revenue for you, there's no reason why you can't keep promoting it month after month. So the precision nutrition example, we had pieces of content that we promoted every single month for years. But that's the starting point, kind of 50% rule, and then let the data drive it from there.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks. Okay, so I have a question here that I think I can answer. Does it matter if the title of the article and the title of the Taboola ad are different? So that's a really good question. And we've actually run some tests to see, because theoretically, like if you want to set user expectation, you should have the same title in the title and image and what we call the sponsored content card. And after you click on it, the same title in the blog post or in the article itself. And what we found is that it's okay if they're different, if they're still saying the same message. So you want to set user expectation. You don't want them to be shocked by like where they're writing, but they won't be shocked if it's like a title that's just phrased a little bit differently. So that could definitely work. And just because a lot of my experience actually has to do with the ads, one thing I would recommend is to visit the site trends.taboola.com. And what we do in the site is basically analyze all of the creatives that run in our network. So you can check what kinds of words are good to put in different titles. What kind of words are trending right now? What kinds of words aren't trending right now? And that could be really helpful when you're trying to think about what kind of title to write. Yeah. Tyler, Nikita, is there anything else that you guys see? I know we're kind of running out of time, but.
Yeah, I know. So there's a lot of really good questions I'm seeing. I was trying to respond via chat as we went, but I'm not convinced I actually sent them properly. So people may not have seen them. So what we're doing on the back end is we're collecting all of the questions and we'll send out a recap with answers. But there is one question I want to touch on because this comes up often. And I think it was Dee who asked this, just around bounce rate and, what would be considered a good bounce rate for content and how do we improve it? It's a super common question. My response is don't weight bounce rate too heavily. I think when we focus on bounce rate too much, it leads to poor decisions, because if you think of bounce rate, it's somebody leaving your website. And if you think of great content satisfies a user's need. So somebody comes to your website, they read your content, they're satisfied, they leave, they've bounced, right? So for a content section of your website, like a blog or resource center, anywhere from 65 to 90% for a bounce rate is sort of what I would expect. But don't try to force people to stay. Don't try to artificially manipulate that bounce rate. Think about the job of great content, and it is to satisfy a need. So what I would think about is, how do I keep them re-engaged? So if people are coming to your website, they're reading that content, how do you suggest other articles? How do you have a strong call to action? And then how do you potentially have a remarketing program in place to bring them back and re-engage them and drive them through sort of a sales funnel when they do lead? So that's just something I wanted to touch on because it comes up quite often. And I just see poor content be developed when we try to write based on influencing bounce rate. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I think we're out of time, but I really enjoyed, meeting you all virtually, I guess. And feel free again to reach out to us if you have any other questions. As Tyler mentioned, we're going to summarize and send you the recording and the deck later. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. And then, like Nikita said, we all love to just talk about this stuff and jam on it. So feel free to inundate.
Way too much.
Yeah, feel free to inundate our LinkedIn boxes.
Awesome. Okay. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye. See ya.